G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to the Rundown Under with Mags, and this is of course my little, vlog segment, where I talk about what's going on with the channel, what's going on with me, and what's going on with the world. So first things first, to address the channel, well, there hasn't been a whole lot of anything going on over the last couple of weeks, and this has been entirely because of this course that I'm doing. So, I didn't realize this initially, but the course that I am doing is split into two parts. The first part only takes 6 months, the second part is going to take 1.5 years to complete. As of yesterday, I have officially completed the first section of the course quite successfully, which is fantastic, but what this first part of the course is actually designed to do is to essentially separate the wheat from the chaff. None of the assessments or the requirements of the course were actually overly complicated. For those of you who are unaware, the course that I'm doing is I'm doing a full degree in graphic design. The first 6 months, nothing in here has been overly difficult to do, but what they have been doing is, as the course has been advancing, pouring more and more and more assessments on. I actually felt a little bit like what it must have felt like to be a German in 1944, watching the Soviet army come towards you, except instead of T-34s, mine was assessment tasks, and every time I destroyed one, 2 more replaced it. Now, the basic idea of running the course this way is, of course, anybody in that course that is unable to keep up with the assessments and actually get a pass is probably going to be incapable of, managing to complete the rest of the course. And, well, it did that. I think at this point, the last I checked, and I was speaking to the teachers of the class on the very last day, at the very last moment of hand-ins, and including myself, less than 10% of the course had actually managed to hand in all of the assessments completed on the final day. And that's before anything actually went through for review to actually see whether or not you'd done well enough to actually pass at all. So, straight away, 90% fail rate on the course before any of the work was actually looked at. So, yeah, it has been hectic the last 2 weeks. But as I said, thankfully that finished yesterday, which means I can start getting back on all the videos. Now, of course, I've had a few requests along the way. Kingdom Come Deliverance. Yes, I have recordings done off that I have just not had time to turn into videos. I will be starting on the next one of those immediately as soon as this one's done. I've got about 6 hours of recorded DCS footage at this point that I have not turned over into videos yet. That's footage intended for it. There's probably 3 to 4 videos there, and I haven't processed them. I'm not lacking the footage, I've just lacked the time to actually be able to turn it into anything watchable. And thankfully, why this section of the course was very much a sprint, the next section of the course is a marathon. I shouldn't have that high intensive workload that I've had over the last 2 weeks, at least not until right at the end of the course, which is Christmas next year. So, fingers crossed, we should be in a good place to actually get the video production back online, get everything running as it should, and to be able to do some of the work and actually get back to my own designs. I actually had to pause a lot of my own artwork that I've been doing for the Magsware store because of the workload. I just didn't have time to complete any of it either. I've got 5 designs now that have gone through concepting. I've gone through the finish marks for exactly what I want to do with the design. I just haven't had the time to complete them yet. There's a couple of designs there that are a little bit tongue-in-cheek that I think people will find rather amusing. A couple of designs that were very US-centric that I wanted to get completed prior to 4th of July for my US subscribers. I don't think I'm going to make that deadline now. The designs may be available, but once you take into account the time it'll actually take to get a product mailed out, I'm not entirely sure whether or not it'll be possible to actually get a finished design in your hands by that date. But that was what I was trying for. I'm still going to put those designs up, and then I have a couple more that I'm doing a bit of a change in art style. I've done these silhouette designs for a start. I think they've looked pretty okay across the board. The next set, I'm probably going to be transferring more into a pop art comic book style for the designs. I think there's actually quite a lot I can do in there, and I really am fond of that particular style. So some aircraft that are more comic book orientated for their finish. It allows me a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of artistic license when it comes to exactly how I draw up the planes, and it means I can also have a little bit of fun, tongue-in-cheek style with the more direct designs as well. I've got one in particular in mind for the A10 Warthog that I'm hoping will turn out okay, because I think you guys will like it. Anyways, that's pretty much the rundown on me and everything that I've been up to in 5 minutes. So, the main thing I wanted to actually cover on this one is my condition with my eyes. I've had a lot of questions for it over the years. I keep intending to make a video sort of covering exactly what the condition is and exactly what I see, and I just keep putting it off. However, there was an article that was released, or at least it was linked to me just a week ago, that had some really interesting photos in it. They're artistic impressions of exactly what somebody with my condition, which is called keratoconus, actually sees. Now, the nature of keratoconus is interesting because there's a couple of forms of it, and it comes in a couple of intensities. The condition itself is not overly uncommon. It can be both genetic and environmental as its cause. My particular form of it is genetic, although there's a lot of questions on exactly how the genetics of keratoconus or predisposition to keratoconus actually works, because it is not hereditary, or at least not in the way that some eye diseases or conditions, health conditions can actually be. As in, sometimes you'll hear that a particular condition may transfer through the male or female side of a family and may come up every second generation, that kind of thing. There's usually some kind of rhythm that these genetic disorders actually have. Keratoconus doesn't seem to follow one when it's in that form. Sometimes it'll pop up, sometimes it won't. It will affect males and females in equal measure. The particular variant of it I have is rare. Of all the people that actually suffer keratoconus, around 1 in 1 million will have it at the severity I have. Sometimes it's referred to as stage 4. There's a whole other different ways to describe it. There's a bit of argument about exactly how accurate stage 4 is as an example for how intense the condition is. Essentially, the long and short of it is, however, that most people that have keratoconus to my severity have been lifelong sufferers of it and would have it in, at this severity in about their 50s, early 60s. I had this in my mid-20s. So, I suppose we should jump through here. What actually is keratoconus? For those of you who are not aware of the condition, there's a long description involving enzymes and free radicals and a breakdown of actually how it functions, but in its most basic form, when you're young and you're growing, the surface of your eye is very soft because your eye is changing shape, particularly the cornea is soft, because your eye needs to grow, as your head grows, as your entire body grows into an adult form. Now, as you reach the end of that growth, the surface of your eye, the cornea, is meant to harden and take shape. In keratoconus patients, this doesn't happen. The eye doesn't harden, it stays soft. And over time it begins to bulge and distort. This is why most people don't really start to notice keratoconus until they're sort of their late teens into their early 20s, because that's the point where the eye should be done. But because it never actually goes through that hardening process, like most eyes naturally do, it doesn't. Now, as the eye, or the lens of the eye begins to distort, like any lens for any type of camera or anything you've played with, it starts distorting the image that it's trying to see, as well as allowing what is essentially a light leak from directions where light shouldn't be coming from and shouldn't be focused within the inside of the lens. Those things start at first to get blurry and glary, and you start developing halo rings around certain things. In fact, I should have some images up on screen right now, if I've done the editing right, that will show you what examples of what you actually see. Mine is actually a little bit worse than anything that you see in these images. I'm going to try and do a little bit of photo editing and see if I can put up one that's closer to what I see. But I'll do that more towards the end. But yes, the eye starts to distort. You start seeing double images, halos around things, and things get very blurry and very distorted very quickly. And this is it is a degenerative condition. It does get worse over time. Now, there is actually a limit to how long it will degenerate for, however, because regardless of how bad the condition is, usually by the time you reach your sort of 50s, 60s, for some people late 40s, depending on how severe their condition is, I'm probably likely to go longer than anything else. but the lens of the eye will harden regardless, just with age. Age will finally beat the eye. And when that happens, the degeneration will stop, and what you are left with will be what you actually have from that point on. Now, while in its earlier stages, you can still discern items even through the blur and the glare and the halos. Once it gets to a certain point, which is where I am with my left eye, which is why I keep describing as it being, I'm being blind in the left eye. I can actually still see out of that eye, but the condition is so severe in that particular eye that I can no longer discern anything but colors and shapes. Well, actually, not even shapes, sort of blobs where there is something is. That eye is really only useful now for detecting movement, because I can see a darker color or a darker shadow or a blackness against a lighter color or a lighter shade in movement. I can actually discern that movement, but actually identifying what it is that is moving is pretty much impossible for me. And it has reached such a point with me that it's actually a really interesting thing to experience, and shows how amazing the human brain is, because the data that's coming through my left eye is essentially junk data that the brain can't use in any reasonable form in order to allow me to see. My brain has essentially, you'll hear the term dominant eye sometimes when you're looking up and researching how humans see. Well, I have an extreme dominant right eye, because I can put a contact lens on that eye still and have it focus to some semblance of normality, although I still see halo rings and there is still blur and there is still distortion. It is significantly better than it would be otherwise. The left eye cannot take a contact lens, and because one eye sees so much better than the other, my brain essentially shuts off, or at least mostly shuts off, the information from my left-hand eye. If I shut my right eye, I can still see through it. But if you look at an object and you shut your right eye, you'll see what you're seeing slightly shift to a left-hand side perspective. And if you shut the opposing eye, the image will shift slightly in the other way. For me, I can open and close my left eye all I want, and the image that I'm seeing does not change, because my brain is, even when my eye is open, it's essentially ignoring everything except movement out of what it sees in the left-hand side. That's all my left-hand eye actually picks up anymore, is essentially movement. So that I still have, I wouldn't call it peripheral vision, but something on my left-hand side can move, and I am aware that something over there is moving, but I cannot identify it. But that movement triggers me to turn and look at it with my right eye, so I can see what it is. So, yeah, I'm hoping the images on the screen are actually passing along. Now, at about now, I'm actually going to put up, I'm going to do it after this, so I'm actually not sure exactly how it's going to look yet, but I'm going to try and take one of the images from the selection that I've got that was in this article, and replicate something more similar to what I see. This is going to go into a little bit more detail here, but because the left eye still does get some information, but it's mostly discarded, my left-hand eye, my brain doesn't read the left-hand information correctly anymore either. It's almost, I guess, a way of putting it was corrupted. If I close my right eye and I can focus on something hard enough to get a line, say a shadow that should be straight left to right level across the horizon, the way my left eye actually sees it, it's slightly out by a couple of degrees. And I also get double vision, which is where that little bit of junk data that is still coming through from the left-hand eye gets overlaid over my vision on the right, usually only brighter lines. So if I'm, say, driving down a road at night time, and this is why I do not drive very often at night anymore. And I should say this generally only happens at night. During the daytime it's relatively okay, but at night when it's a lot of dark, a lot of bright lights, a lot of contrast, is when I tend to get sort of the overlaid vision. But the white line on the left-hand side of the road when you're driving down, or on your passenger side of the vehicle, depending on where you are in the world, it's bright enough in car light that my left eye will pick it up, and it will overlay it at an off angle across my vision that I'm seeing through the right eye. So I get a ghost of that line cutting across my vision and across the road. And this is with my contact in, I should point out. Actually, I should probably go into my contact a little bit. Most contact lenses that people have are a very soft silicon that just goes over the eye and corrects the magnification on the eye, so people don't have to wear glasses. Glasses are not an option for this condition at all. And silicon contact lenses will do nothing because the focus isn't actually the issue, it's the distortion of the eye. So what I have to wear to correct my vision is a hard plastic contact lens. It's known as a gas permeable contact lens that essentially presses against my cornea and forces it into the correct shape. It's quite irritating to wear, it can even be painful at some times, and I do have to take it out semi-regularly to put drops in it and to clean it and you know, over the course of the day. About once an hour I have to pull it out roughly to treat the contact and put it back in. With the contact in, it corrects the vision in my right eye by about 80%. I'm not 20/20 vision, but I'm good enough that in daylight hours I can drive perfectly fine, at least as well as anybody else who has any kind of eye condition. It's not a major issue. And I can function. I can do everything that I need to do, but it does cause pretty much constant irritation and pain, and because it is hard plastic rubbing against your eye for the entire time you're awake or the entire time that you've got it in, it does actually scar the surface of your eye a little bit over time as well, which is something else that has to be monitored in this condition. While the contact corrects the issue and allows me to actually function and not be, you know, completely blind and unable to do anything, it does have its negative sides, and you do need to monitor those. So I go in about once every 6 months to get eye checks to monitor the rub, the wear, the scarring, and to also check the contact lens versus the degradation of the eye, because the contact lens has to be custom made for the shape of the eye. And as the eye changes, as the condition degrades, the contact lens needs to change as well. So about once every 12 months I have to get this lens fitted, or a new lens fit to the new shape of the eye in order to correct the condition. And the lenses cost about $1,000 each roughly, but yeah, it's about once every 12 months I've got to get one of those put on and adjusted and fit. And I can't get a contact lens for the left eye because the left eye will not take a contact lens. It is in constant agony the second the lens goes in. I have had them fit before, and they do correct the vision pretty much as well as the one in the right eye, but my eye will not adjust for the pain of actually having a lens in, so I can't wear them. They cause massive headaches if I try and hold them in. It's like having sandpaper rubbed against your eyeball. It's horrible, it's nasty, and it happens to some people. Some people cannot have gas permeable contact lenses. Thankfully I can have one in one eye. There are some people that have this condition at my sort of a stage that I've been told about that could not have any form of contact lens fit. It was just too painful for them. They just didn't have the option. What my left eye can see is also only in large amounts of movement. Small objects are basically invisible to me, and my ability to focus on small points with even the right eye with the contact in is also extremely limited. So for example, reading. I have extreme difficulty reading out of books now. I have to hold them incredibly close to my face in order to be able to read. And while I do have quite an extensive library, I have started taking to getting books wherever possible. They're not always available, so I still do have a fairly extensive written library, but I do get them in digital formats wherever possible, because I can put them on a tablet with a large screen. I can adjust the lighting to a level that is optimal for my eyes, and I can use the digital format to increase the size of the text to whatever is required for me to be able to read the information. It does happen, you know, doing flight sim stuff. There are times when I will glance down and I'm unable to read a gauge in the cockpit. So you may notice in some of my videos, and it probably actually works really well for YouTube, I will zoom the camera right in on gauges when I'm checking something out, or get really close rather than just glancing at a distance, which works well for you guys because you can accurately see what I'm looking at and you can read the gauges despite the compression issues of YouTube. But the reason why I'm doing it is because I actually can't read the information as presented. I have to get that close to be able to read it myself. And yes, this does go back to other things in flight sims, things like markers, like an interesting one that I don't think people really understand. Even when I'm running full markers in, say, DCS or even IL2, so I have the full name of the aircraft, all the information on the range and everything else, I often cannot read that information. It's actually too small. But I use the blue or the red of the text, whatever color it happens to be, as a way of allowing me to actually see the aircraft itself at all. Without that strong contrast color to background movement, I would never actually be able to see the aircraft. I struggle with it. I try not to use them wherever possible, and sometimes I get a good run and I just happen to spot things just right, but regularly I cannot see without them, and I can't actually read the text either. I'm only seeing blue or red or whatever it happens to be, and I'm using that to isolate where I need to look in order to try and find what I'm looking for, because otherwise, as I said before, small objects, small movements can become completely invisible to me, and that's with my contact in, due to the blur I get off the left eye and how my eyes function. Sometimes it helps if I shut my left eye while I'm flying, to block out the sort of the junk data that is coming through from the left eye and try and focus a little bit better. But sometimes even that doesn't help, and that's why I run that side. So even though I'm being presented with the information, it's actually not helping me as much as it would help anybody else. I sort of need that in order to be able to work around the problem that I have in regards to vision. So yeah, anyways, that is my condition. My I said stage 4 is actually, I've been told, not a great way of describing it anymore, but it's sort of the only thing that I have for it. But my advanced form of keratoconus that I actually have. The common question that also pops up, what can actually be done about it? For me personally, not a lot. There's actually a lot of things that can be used to address keratoconus in its general forms. Because of the severity of mine, most of these are not available. The easiest one that's best for people that have keratoconus in a very early stage or a lesser intense form is corneal cross-linking. This essentially hardens the surface of the eye artificially so that you can see. And it prevents continued degradation of the eye. So it may not correct the problem that you already have up to that point, but it will prevent it from getting any worse. And if they catch it early enough, you might have a little bit of a blur or a little bit of a halo around lights, but otherwise you'll be perfectly fine and never even need contacts. So yeah, important, you go and get your eyes checked. If you've got any halos or any blur effects, get your eyes checked. Alright? Don't wind up with eyes like mine. Beyond that, for me, I've really only got 2 options left available, and one of them I only found out about 6 months ago. Now, the new option is called Intax. These are, as I understand it, I think they're silicon-based. They're essentially a miniature contact lens, but rather than going over the surface of the eye, you go in for surgery and they slice the side of your cornea open and they insert the Intact underneath your cornea. And it pushes the cornea into the correct shape, and they generally do a little bit of nipping and tucking and so on, whatever else needs to be done to it in order to pull it over the eye and get it to the right shape. And once that's done, I think it also involves doing corneal cross-linking after to harden the surface of the eye to prevent it from going through any more degradation than it currently is, so that it fits and stays and does what it needs to do. I don't know much about this one yet. I know it's exceedingly expensive in the United States. It's $2,000 a lens, and I would need $2,000 or $4,000 a lens, and I would need 2 lenses, and it was $12,000 or $14,000 US per surgery, 1 per eye. I'm currently not sure about its availability inside of Australia, and I'm currently not sure how it fits in with our Medicare and our medical systems for this kind of stuff. I'm sort of hoping it's supported, otherwise it's going to be some time before I can afford to do this one. But it's probably my greatest hope at the moment, because it could potentially completely correct the vision without a need for, as funny as it sounds, that's actually not too major a surgery in comparison to my alternative. My alternative is corneal replacement, where they have to shear the entire cornea off my eye with a scalpel and replace it with a donor cornea, and it has to be stitched up, and it may not fully correct my vision. There's possibility that I'll have a ring scar around my eye afterwards that'll constantly distort my vision still. There'll be a huge amount of medication that I have to take as a result of it, and the recovery time on that is about 6 months. And I think for the first 2 months, it's a month to 2 months, your eye can't be exposed to daylight or anything at all. You have to have your head wrapped, and then it's 6 months to actually recover and heal. And I would need to go through that twice to correct both eyes, and it's all kinds of awful. And the worst part, and here's some nightmare fuel for you guys, you have to be awake during the entire operation. So you're completely awake and conscious and able to see when the scalpel starts doing its thing. So sleep well tonight with that thought. So yeah, obviously I want to avoid that as much as possible. The Intacs are going to be nasty enough, and they have to be done while awake as well, but at least it's only a snip and an insert, and it's not as bad as having whole pieces cut off, and you get to keep your own cornea, which means some of the medications that you have to take because, you know, donor, essentially a donor organ, you don't have to have those. But yeah, that's really my last two options that I have left at this point, and I'm just essentially running until my right eye degrades to the point where it can't take a contact anymore, and then I'll be getting the surgery done, and that's essentially where I'm at this point. So, yeah, look, once again, I'm just going to say to you guys straight, if you have any halo effects, any blur, it may not be keratoconus, it may be nothing significant at all, regardless if you see any kind of blur, halos, distortions, anything messed up with your vision at all, get your bloody eyes checked. It may be absolutely nothing, but if it does turn out to be something and they catch it early enough, it might be a simple day procedure, boom, you're out, you're perfectly fine, your vision's good forever. If you don't, you wind up with eyes as fucked as mine, and trust me, you do not want this bullshit on your hands. Anyways, guys, on this rather depressing sort of a subject, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you very much for watching. Hope you got through it, hope you found it interesting, hope it explained any of your questions for those of you who had them, and until next time, remember to click that like button if you do, subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.